Hi, I'm Beth, creator of Dry It, Can It. I'm not an expert, I am just a homemaker, and I like to share with you tips, tricks, and recipes for freeze drying, canning, and dehydrating. And today I want to walk you through a full session on my Stay Fresh freeze dryer. Now, there are many different people who may do things differently, but I want to show you how I do it and how easy it is to use this and the choices that I make and why I make these. So I'm getting ready to put a load in. Let's see how it works. So depending upon the version of software you have, this probably looks like your screen. And what I'm going to do is show you how easy it is to get going. You have a button here that says freeze drying, and I'm going to push that. And today I'm going to just use regular frozen food that I've already frozen in the freezer of mine. So I hit frozen food. Now, what I like to do is I like to come to this setting button, and you'll see you have a couple of different things here. You have your freezer time and you have your shelf temperature. When these green lights are on, that means when it hits that criteria, your pump is going to kick in. Now, I like to turn this off and have this one on. So what this is freezing time. If you were going to put your food in without freezing it in the freezer first, this is the one you would want to use, and you would want to make sure that your food is good and frozen. I would suggest probably 24 hours for that. My food is coming from the freezer, so I'm actually going to set mine for 3 hours, which is sort of the default that I use. I use that for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to take an hour for my freeze dryer to get up to the temperature that I want it to get to. And secondly, I want to let my frozen food, which is in the freezer at 0, still make sure that it's really frozen to the core for the best results. So basically my food's going to go in and it's going to be under the freeze temperature below 0 for at least 2 hours. These parameters here, these are preset by the factory. This is where you would change your temperature if you wanted to. You would just push that and then set whatever you wanted. But I'm going to leave mine back the way it is. I guess I want to escape here. Leave that at 120. Your final dry hours is something that you always want to set. When your freeze dryer is drying your food and gets to this temperature you set, then your pump is going to shut off. And most often your food is not going to be completely dry then. So what I do is I always hit this, and you want to have at least 24 hours. I always punch in 40 hours, not because I'm going to let it run that long, but because it's sort of easy for me to calculate from that time. And if for some reason I have an emergency or an extended time that I'm going to be away, I know I'm good. So basically what that means is when your food hits this 120 temperature, instead of your pump shutting off, it's going to go to extra dry time for at least 40 hours. And I'll take you through that as we go. So I'm going to hit back. And I have my everything closed in terms of my door. I have my valves shut off, and then I'm just going to hit start. And what's going to happen is my temperature here, you can hear that the machine started. My temperature now is going to take the cylinder, which is the drum, the round part here, and it's going to freeze that down to temperature. And I'm going to find that cylinder is called the trap, and right now it's 58 degrees. The shelf is the second shelf where you put your food. So I'm going to wait for this to get down to 0 before I put my food in. Actually, this will get down to minus probably 30 or 40, sometimes even 50, and I'm going to wait for my shelf temperature to get down to at least 0 before I put my food in, because I don't want to bring my food, and in this case I actually have some soup today that's frozen. I don't want my food to get start thawing in any way. So when the shelf temperature gets down to 0, that's when I'm going to put my food in, and I know from my machine that takes about an hour. So stay tuned while I show you the next steps once I'm ready to put the food in. All right, so as you can see, the trap temperature is at minus 50. During the summer months when it's warmer, sometimes it gets to 40 to 45. And the shelf temperature, the shelves where I put the food, is at 4. So I'm going to start pulling my food out of the freezer and getting ready to put that in. All right, so into the freeze dryer today, I'm going to put some sliced ham, some apples, a couple of trays of soup, and then some leftover shredded chicken, some sourdough starter, and I'm actually going to experiment with some popsicles today. My shelf temperature is at 2 degrees, and that's close enough for me to go ahead and put the food in. The food is in the freeze dryer in each of the shelves. So I close the door and latch it. I made sure my valves were closed. Then I simply go up to the screen and put food in freezer rather. So what that does is tells the machine that the food is ready to go when the machine is ready to go. And again, if I go to my settings, I have the setting that when the freeze dryer's been running for 3 hours, the pump will kick on. And up here, it tells me how long it's been running. So when this hits 3 hours, the drying cycle is going to start. And you can see that the temperature has come up because I had the door open and put food in, but that'll come down quickly. So food in chamber. And I'm going to be back here in not quite 3 hours, or 2 hours, because the machine's been running for an hour. These lights over here are normal. You don't really have to worry about these at all. Okay, so you can see that the freezing's been going for 2 hours and 59 minutes. So any moment it's going to switch to drying, and this button is going to come on. And I've got my food in chamber. So remember, when I did my settings, I said when the freezing time exceeds 3 hours to turn the pump on, which is what we're waiting for. So I'm going to see, you're going to see that happen. Now I have an industrial pump. I like that because I only have to change the oil every 30 times or so. And you hear that? The pump just went on, and you'll notice the drying is there. Now that pump isn't going to make that much noise for that much time. You'll notice that my trap temperature is minus 53 Fahrenheit, and my shelf temperature, which is the shelf of the food, is at minus 19. So my food is really frozen and in the trays. Now, my pump, you always want to make sure that your pump, first of all, you want to make sure your valves are closed, and I checked those ahead of time. My pump I have below, I have the industrial pump, and what you want to do is this button right here is your valve that helps everything work with your demister. Your demister basically takes the water, the moisture out. So what I always do, sometimes I'll let this run for maybe 10 minutes to let the pump warm up, but then what you want to do is you want to turn this so that you open it all the way up. So counterclockwise, and you'll feel the resistance. Now normally I let my pump run for about 10 minutes before I empty that, but you want to make sure that you do that. So beyond that, this is going to show how long the drying has taken place. Right now it's only been 1 minute. This is your total time the machine has been running, 3 hours and 1 minute. 1 minute of that was drying time. 3 hours we know is the freezing time. So I expect my food is going to take somewhere between 24 and 30 hours. And if you stay with me, I'll be checking this machine, or checking my food rather, when I think it's done. You'll notice that the vacuum, the torr, which is the pressure, is going down. And you'll also notice that your liner around the cylinder here, that as the pressure goes, this door basically just sort of sucks in. So my torr will continue to drop, and it'll go up and down a little bit as the temperature changes. And generally this will get low, for me, really low in the one, anywhere between 100 and 150 when my food is close to done. And that's going to vary by machine, your temperature and your environment, your humidity and everything. So if you're finding this video helpful so far, it would be appreciated if you'd give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel in the lower right corner. So stay tuned as we continue through this journey. All right, when I woke up this morning, I was in final dry time already. So basically when the machine thinks everything is dry, this is going to go from drying to final dry. And this is the point where you can increase or decrease your drying time if you want. Now, I still have a trap, meaning the cylinder at -48. My shelf is at 120. Remember, that was the target temperature, and when it hit 120 degrees, that's when it moves to final drying. And then of course my torr is, my pressure is really down, and you want that down, so that's good. So when I look at these numbers, this is the total time the machine's been running since I turned it on. 3 of these hours were freeze time. So technically it's been in drying mode of some sort for 22.5 hours. Then I look at this time, and remember I set my dry time for 40 hours extra. That's the final drying. So it goes freezing, drying, then final drying. I had set that for 40 hours. It's been running for about 8.5 hours. So when I look at this, the machine was saying, hey, your food's probably dry in around 14 hours. Maybe it was 14.5. So at this point, what I did is it's 7 or 8 o'clock this morning, I paused the machine and I felt my food with my hand, and I felt the bottom of the trays. If they would have felt cool or cold at all, I would have just put this back, the food back in, and then resumed drying. But they felt warm. So what I did is I took the trays out and I weighed them, and I weighed them on a scale with grams. And I do that because there are 28 grams in an ounce, so you're going to get the best measurement as to whether or not moisture is still being pulled. But let me show you how you take and you pause your freeze dryer so that you can check the weight of your food. So you can do this when it's drying or final drying. But what you want to do is you want to hit the tab. It says, do you want to pause the drying? And yes, I do. So once you do that, you're going to go over to your valve and you're going to open this, but you don't want to open it all the way. You just want to open it a little bit so that the pressure decreases. And you'll see right away that your torr will move to 2000 very quickly. And sometimes your shelf temperature will vary a little bit as you're releasing the pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, when the pressure is completely down, when the hissing stops, then I'm going to weigh my trays again and see if I've lost any grams. If I haven't, then I know all the moisture is pulled out. And if I have, then I will put my food back in for another 2 to 3 hours. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll be back. All right, all 4 of my trays were actually weighing exactly the same. So everything, including the 2 trays of soup, did dry in about 14.5 hours, which is the beauty of a Stay Fresh freezer. It works really well. But I want to show you how to take this back in case your food wasn't dry. So what you're going to do is you're going to come back over here and you're going to close this valve again so that your pressure can build. And then you're going to come back up here, and I've got to change hands on my holding the camera. I'm going to come back to the final drying here, and I'm going to push this, and it's going to ask you to make sure that you don't have water in your residue. Your drain valve is closed, which I just closed. Your cold trap temp is lower than 20, and that you have no liquid in the vacuum pump, which if you didn't wait a long time, you're not going to have any of that. So I'm just going to say I want to restart this machine, and you can see my cold trap temp, again, that's the cylinder, was definitely below 20. So now the machine is starting back up, and it's going to go back up to pressure. The seal on the door, you can see the thick black. That's because the glass has already been pulled in as the pressure is building. And after a few minutes, this number here, that the torr, will start going down again. And the shelf temperature will come back up. Remember, that dropped down to 108 because I had the door open when I was checking the temperature, and I pulled the trays out. But that'll come back up to the 120, and your pressure will start dropping again. And really, once you finish drying your food, you need to do a couple of things to your machine, and if you stay tuned, I will show you what you do when you get your food out, and what you want to do for care of your machine. When you get your food out of the trays, you want to put them in a Ziploc bag or Tupperware or something that's moisture proof until you can bag it. Once your food gets to whatever your room temperature is, it'll start absorbing moisture, and if it starts absorbing moisture, then you're risking putting your food at mold. For long-term storage, you want to put them in Mylar bags. I put the soup in Mylar bags already, and then you want to seal that. I'll be doing a whole video on how to seal everything, but what's important for long-term storage is that your Mylar bags have 7 milliliters on each side, and I have a video on what to watch for Mylar bags so that you don't get ripped off, so I'll put a link in here to that. But let's go to how to clean the freeze dryer once you're done with it. Let's talk about defrosting your unit. So what you can probably see is you're going to have rings of ice inside of your freezer when you're done, and you do need to defrost between each batch that you do. So there's a couple ways you can do it. The first way is to simply leave your door open and let nature take its course. Depending upon your ice load, that might take anywhere from 3 to 12 hours, and the ice will fall into your drum, and we'll talk about how to drain that in a second here. The other way you can do it, and this is obviously free to do this, the other way to do it is to use the defrost feature. And the defrost feature is relatively inexpensive to use. If you wanted to do a second batch, I would do this because you'll be defrosted in about 3 hours. And it's really easy to do. What you're gonna do is you're gonna hit the defrost button. You can set this time for anything you want. I'm gonna leave it for 3 hours based on the ice that I have. If I had less ice, sometimes I have more of a frost, then I'll change it to 2 hours. The temperature default is 130. I just leave that, and you hit start, and it's defrosting. If the machine senses that you're going to be defrosted faster than 3 hours, it'll shut off and say done defrosting. Let's talk about where the water goes when you do this. Now on the right side of the machine you have another valve, and this is your drain valve. This also has to be closed anytime you're doing anytime you're freeze drying, because otherwise you're going to have a pressure leak. You won't be able to get the pressure. You also got a long plastic tube, and I usually don't have this attached until I'm ready to drain again, but what you're going to do is you're simply going to open up that valve, and at the end of that tube you're going to have a bucket, and the water is going to drain in there. Now I always move that a little bit away from that just so there's room, and you'll be surprised how much food comes, or how much water I should say, comes out of that over the period of time. If you decide to let it defrost naturally, make sure that you leave this gasket in place, because if you don't, you're going to have water dripping off the edge, and I always keep a towel under my machine just for any condensation that catches there. It's not real deep, it's just like so, and it works out pretty well, because sometimes you will get a little condensation drip. But leave this gasket in place if in fact you're going to let the machine defrost on its own. Also, one other thing, when you get your trays, sometimes they arrive upside down. There's an orange part that's underneath. Those are your heat pads. Those should always be on the bottom, so you'll have your silver tray on top. So make sure that you adjust that accordingly once you get your machine. So stay tuned, and I am going to show you how much water came out of this, as well as the last steps for cleaning and for draining the oil. All right, I said drain the oil, but I really mean the demister. You want to drain the oil off of this unit anytime you finish doing your batch. So to do that, you're simply going to take and you're going to unscrew that counterclockwise, like so, okay? You're gonna lift that off, and then I have a jar, which I should have opened to start with, that I put my oil in. Bear with me just a second. Okay, so I just put my oil in this. There's a little lever here that you're just going to open, like so, and you're going to pour your oil out. And this basically, the demister, as I understand it, takes the moisture and separates that from the oil, and then your mist, your water comes out the top. And you'll see there's not really a lot of oil that comes. I usually turn it this way and then back like this. And then just get a towel, kind of wipe that off like so, close it up, and then put it back on your machine like so. And basically you're just going to screw that back on again. And that really is all there is to cleaning that portion of it off. Now it's best, I think, to do that shortly after you've done your food, simply because I think the oil is warmer. And put that in place, and just like so, you've emptied the oil out of your demister. The other thing I like to do is to check my oil level, and I do that pretty regularly, even when I'm doing a load. And though you can't see it real well, I'm here. Your oil needs to be at a minimum down here and at a maximum here. So if my oil was lower, I might want to add more oil before my next batch, but I know that I'm good there. If you were going to add more oil, you're going to remove this pin here, and you're going to put your oil in accordingly. But that's another lesson for another day. To change your oil every 30 batches, you're going to unscrew this. You get a tool to do that. You're going to have a jar underneath to catch the oil, and then you're going to put new oil again here. Really important that you don't put your oil there. Okay? Oil in, oil out. All right, defrosting is done. You can see it took 2 hours and 53 minutes. Now, let's take a look inside and see what we have. All right, so let's take a look inside and see what we've got, because there are a couple of things you want to watch for, and I'm going to try and record this, but we'll see how it goes. So when we look inside, you've got your rubber gasket here, which you leave in place until you're done. And I always check the bottom of this to make sure that there's not water there. And there is some water right now. If I pull that out, otherwise it'll drip down. Sometimes there's pockets of ice in the back where the drain is, and that is what kind of blocks that water. So you're going to pull this off like so, and then you're going to wipe this down really well. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to defrost your freeze dryer and then just leave it, because it's warm inside, it's wet, and you do not want to create moldy conditions. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the shelf out. So what I do on that is I usually check on top, and this is pretty, oh, it's got a little bit of water. Usually there's some ice or some water that falls from the top. So I usually have a towel handy to just wipe that out. And then I just pull that up and set it up on top, like so, with the cord on the side. Hopefully you can see that. Let me adjust the camera. So you can see that I just set it up on top. And then I'm going to put this on mute and then turn around and show you what's remaining. Now that hole where I push the water, you actually want to take some kind of a blower, like an air mattress inflator, and you want to blow air down that, because there's an L-shaped trap, and you want to get all of the water out of that. That's really important so that you don't have mold in there. And you may have received one of those with your unit. I know I did. I'm not sure if they're including those anymore or not, but you definitely want to do that. Then you take the rest of the drum and wash it out with soapy water and rinse really well. Now I usually like to wait until the drum, or the trap as they say, feels room temperature and not cold, because you don't want any condensation. And then to disinfect it, the best thing you can do is use a 70% isopropyl alcohol. That actually is more effective than a 90%, believe it or not. So let me show you what I do then last, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, so you can kind of see how much water is in the bucket there. It's a good gallon or so. And I've still got my pipe attached to my drain. And I don't use the clamp on this because I find it's really not necessary. I just pull that off, and then I blow air in that trap one more time so there's no drips coming out of here, so that I know that that is good and clean. Then lastly, you're going to want to take and you're going to want to clean your trays. Mine are pretty clean. They work out pretty well. The best thing to do is just use a wet rag and kind of pull it from side to side, or a bottle brush of some sort, like a brush that you'd use to clean out baby bottles. That works reasonably well also. I know this video may have gotten a little bit long, but I hope I gave you a really good idea of how this works in the freeze mode. In other words, with frozen food. I intend to show you the candy mode next, and I hope that you will follow my channel. Thumbs up if you learned anything. Hopefully this is a good introduction. I'll have a link to the Stay Fresh freezer if you're interested, and if you're interested in buying one, if you use the code DRYCAN, you can get an extra $50 off. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. One more thing, I strongly recommend that when you're done with your freeze dryer, you do rinse out that clear pipe with warm water, but more importantly, be sure to store your unit with the door open and the valves open to avoid mold.